Good morning. It's the Monday after Easter, and welcome to everybody who's joining in with us again for another week of Coffee with a Farmer or Resource Manager. And this morning we've got that's right, Vincent Sorena, who's joining us from AC Operations down in Bakersfield, and we're going to learn more about what AC Operations is, and they're not just in Bakersfield, in a bit. But to start us out, we'll do our normal kind of roundup and ask a question of all of our coordinators around the state. So we're going to start out today with the question of, in this quarantine last month or so, what is something that you have been learning about yourself? One, can be positive, can be something that maybe is a little bit more challenging that you know that you need to work on. And maybe it's even something that you're learning about a child or something in this process that you're home with that you may not be home with all of the time as you are right now. So I'll start out. My name is Mary Kimball, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Land-Based Learning. I'm here in Winters. And one thing that I've been learning about myself is that I am really enjoying getting out and walking around all different parts of woodland. Normally, I kind of just target certain areas and certain neighborhoods, and I've really been enjoying getting out and going to new neighborhoods and saying hi to people that I normally would never see or say hi to, and it's been really fun, and I'm going to continue that and not just stay in my own neighborhoods throughout, when this all ends. I'm enjoying seeing and talking to different people. All right, Dana, you're up.
Good morning. I'm Dana Baker. I'm the Tehama County Farms Leadership Coordinator, and I'm coming from Red Bluff. One thing that I have learned during this quarantine period about myself is how little patience I have for my own two children. I have a lot of patience for other people's children, but my own are a little bit more of a challenge. And in that, I also think this has been a great time for me to have learned a lot of things about my kids in their struggles and their strengths and weaknesses, kind of when it comes to the education side, because as parents, we don't necessarily see, how they really work with math and reading and that kind of thing. So it's been really neat to see and be a part of that and realize how I can support them more from home on an everyday aspect. My daughter, she's really strong in reading as a first grader, but really struggles in math. And my son is the complete opposite. He loves math and is really a whiz at it. And the language arts, he could care less about. So it'll be fun to move forward and, continue to build on those at home.
Awesome. Thanks, Dana. Joseph? You're on mute, Joseph. There we go.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Montoya. I'm the Farms Coordinator for Sacramento Valley. Broadcasting today from West Sacramento. One thing that I've learned over the course of this circumstance is just how to better manage my time. I feel that I have more control over it and I can just focus better. I don't know why, this whole thing, maybe it's just everyone coming to a slowdown and it's had an impact on me personally, but I feel it and it's refreshing and it feels good.
Excellent. I like that. All right. Let's see. Katie.
Good morning. My name is Katie Workman. I am the Central Valley Farms Leadership Coordinator in Fresno. I would have to agree with Joseph. The slowdown for kind of everyone has been great. I don't typically have a lot of patience, but I think I've been developing more patience as we're kind of just stuck in our own little everyday, and hanging out with my daughter and helping her write letters that we've never really done before, stuff that I haven't seen her do in school, which is amazing that she can do so much, but she can write letters, and we've been writing to friends and grandparents, and so just kind of taking time to doing those types of things.
Yes, used to do those a lot as kids. Write letters to grandma. They always like those things. All right, Romi.
Good morning. My name is Romi Wattenbarger. I'm the Kern County Farms Coordinator here in Bakersfield. And one thing I'd say surprises me is how much I can eat. I just find myself, if I'm not working, I can eat anything inside my, I just comfort food. If I have nothing else to do, I'll just eat. But so.
I think a lot of people are sharing that one.
Yeah. So I have in common that, so.
All right, and Letty.
Hi, I'm Letty Hernandez. I run the program in Monterey and Santa Cruz County. One thing I've learned during this time is one thing I'm rediscovering, I guess, is my spirituality, and been really focusing on some spiritual health and really trying to find some balance in myself in that way.
That's great. I think it's really important that we all find different things to take out of this time and hopefully continue right afterwards, that it's not just going back to quote normal, that there's things that we've learned and that we can take with us and hopefully for the better. So, and students, whoever's on, you guys feel free to use chat or question and answer and share with us some of the things that you are learning about yourselves in this time frame. So now I'm going to introduce our guest today, Vincent Sorena, who is, again, he is the Vice President, this fancy title, Vice President of Professional Services for AC Operations. And again, he's going to tell us what AC Operations is, because I actually don't know all of the things that they do, and I'm really interested to learn it myself. And he is born and raised in Bakersfield and still lives in Bakersfield, works in Bakersfield. And so I'm actually going to turn it over to you, Vincent, and say welcome and thank you for joining us this morning to tell us about yourself. We'll start with that.
Well, good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the Land-Based Learning for hosting this. I think this is a great opportunity for us to compile different perspectives across the state of California and really focus on the opportunities that this situation has given us. My name is Vincent Sorena, as mentioned, Vice President of Professional Services. What that entails is responsibilities for human resources, IT, quality assurance, food safety and employee safety, sustainability and water resource management. So quite a bit of stuff on the plate.
That's a lot.
So it's a lot. It sounds a lot more daunting than it actually is, or maybe not. And so what I've learned is, one, I don't use as much toilet paper as most other people. It's not going as fast as everyone expected. I also learned how bad I've been with food waste in my life up until this point. So really concentrating on using as much food in as many ways as we possibly can around the house. Those leftovers that sit in the back of the refrigerator that just get thrown out, was really bad at that. And I think going through this process learned how important it is to continue to utilize as much food that you buy as possible, really focusing on limiting food waste within your household. And that means a lot in the broader context of the agricultural space. So it's really interesting learning for me, since I've been in agriculture my entire life, or not my entire life, my entire professional career. But up until recently, didn't really understand what my impact was on food waste. So I'm really happy, and I really believe that coming out of this whole thing, that have a more keen concentration on minimizing food waste within the house, as well as promoting that across every relationship I possibly can.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's been, as you've noticed, I'm sure food waste issues been really growing as a topic of conversation, and more than a topic of conversation, of something that needs real change in our systems. And you're right. I think a lot of people are recognizing that a lot more right now, because they're at home and they're really seeing it, versus just maybe cleaning the fridge once a week and not caring so much and tossing things out. So again, I think there's going to be a lot of things that we see coming out of this that are going to hopefully change our environmental footprint and for the better.
Sure.
So tell us about what your story is. How did you get to agriculture? Because tell us a little bit about where you went to school and kind of how you got into the job that you're in today.
Sure. So going back to the high school days, I was absolutely committed to being an attorney. I went to Liberty High School in Bakersfield, and my dad was an attorney, and so I was committed to going to law school. That was my focus, and so got accepted to the University of California, Berkeley. Go Bears!
Go Bears!
And through my time there, I realized that I was really bad at chemistry. And so I was going to be science-based and then transition into the legal world. That very quickly changed. And so then started getting an appreciation for macroeconomics. And so got a degree in political economics, which really looks at the dynamics of economics and political science. And so each country has a different set of criteria that they can base their economy on. And there are certain limitations given natural resources, geopolitical affiliation and association. And so that really started to interest me. And then, I took 3 years of Italian, which is just
very helpful.
Yeah, very helpful in the grand scheme of what I do. So I graduated in 2009 with a degree in political economics of industrialized societies, with an emphasis in post-Soviet Union economic development, which is a really interesting test case for how economies can make good and bad decisions given their current economic situation. And so that was in 2009, and kind of benchmarking off of yet another not so great point in history. That was a really difficult time to find a job.
Yes.
So I searched and searched around Bakersfield and couldn't find anything. And then finally got an opportunity to interview out at Paramount Farms, which is now wonderful. And I was in a position where I had to say yes to any job that came along. And it so happened that it was going to be in agriculture. So, I took a job as a quality assurance supervisor. I knew nothing about quality assurance whatsoever. I knew nothing about almonds. I knew nothing about pistachios, but I knew that I needed a job. And so it was time to get to work. So just that's how my career started in agriculture. It was more on the food processing side. Worked in quality assurance for a while, and then there's a very close association with quality assurance and food safety. So got involved with food safety certifications, internal auditing, then kind of hopped around the business for a while, did some work in logistics, did some work as a facilities manager, and then ultimately had the title of senior quality assurance manager before I left. So handling all of our customer and consumer complaints, running our laboratory, and then our what was called our RQS system, which was a statistical process control system where we actively monitored quality attributes of the products and the different phases of processing to make sure that we were meeting our specifications. And so after that, decided that I was going to take a big leap of faith. Being relatively new in my career, I find it really difficult to turn down opportunity and really try to continue to develop yourself from a very early time in your professional career. And so I transitioned to a much smaller family-owned asset management group. We had 5 institutional and family-owned asset or investors that we managed their assets for. That was primarily in almonds and table grapes. We had some pistachios and wine grapes. And so that was really a fundamental shift for me. So I was going from processing facility of a very large scale, then going to a small family-owned business where I was interfacing with investors and being more actively involved out in the fields. So I managed a lot of different components of that business. Working for a smaller business, you get to touch a lot of different components of things, AR, AP, cash flow, all those things. When in a larger business that you really don't get the opportunity to touch. I worked there for about 5 years, and then about 11 months ago, transitioned over to AC operations. So just to give a little bit of insight into AC operations. AC operations can be thought of in two really distinct buckets. The first bucket is agriculture capital. So agriculture capital is the investment manager. What they do is they create an investment thesis. They take that investment thesis and go into the institutional investment world and try to solicit funding. And they've since raised 2 different tranches of funding. Once they raise that money, they go through and deploy the capital into the agricultural space. That deployment of capital on the AC side spans from California to Oregon to Washington, and then an increasing footprint in Australia. So their footprint is table grapes, citrus, blueberries, blueberry processing, hazelnuts, an IQF facility in Washington, and then a majority ownership of a citrus packing facility in Australia, as well as some citrus holdings. So AC operations is a small subset of that. And so the way that I like to think about it is raising money is very, very difficult to do. Spending money is very, very easy to do, as we all can attest to. And then once you spend the money, you have to operate the business. And that's where AC operations comes in. We're an operational arm of that business. And so we manage a vertically integrated table grape operation. We have 2 citrus packing facilities, as well as a good amount of citrus land that we use the citrus packing facility to process. We also have a citrus nursery, as well as about 1,200 acres of agricultural land with blueberries and almonds in Stockton. And then once we transition into Oregon, we have a blueberry processing facility in Oregon.
Whew!
I know.
That was a lot.
Mouthful.
That was a mouthful. So your position now, managing professional services. You were talking about this a little bit earlier, but one of the things you do is you normally, not during quarantine, you're out and about visiting all of the different processing facilities. So again, those are in Bakersfield or Kern County.
Yep.
They're in name those areas again, and what the different processing facilities are.
Sure. So starting at the bottom of the valley, we have table grapes in Arvin, and then going up into Delano, we have table grapes as well as our cold storage facilities there. And then as we transition up the valley, in Lindsay, we have a citrus packing facility. Dinuba, we have another citrus packing facility. And then in that Exeter Wood Lake area, the citrus belt, as it's called, have a good amount of holdings there. And then as we transition up into Stockton, that's where we have about 1,200 acres of the blueberries and the almonds. And then up in, I guess it's just east of Salem, Oregon, is where our blueberry processing facility is.
I haven't been on a blueberry farm or blueberry processing, so that's on my. The others I have, but the list so when at some point I look forward to meeting with you at one of those facilities to check it out. Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot of different jobs that are at your company. So as you know, one of our goals of our program is to introduce students in general to agriculture, environmental sciences, and all of the different things going on out there, but also really about all of the different kinds of jobs and opportunities in the businesses, the industry. So just name a couple, 5 or 6 different jobs that your company has, especially for someone who would be kind of entry level. So maybe, you know, thinking about someone who maybe is going to college right now and could be doing a summer internship, or someone who's graduated with an ag degree and, you know, looking for opportunities. And also what are some of the real upcoming kinds of positions? So if someone was going to be going into school, say next year in maybe it's not even an ag, business, whatever, and they're looking for, you know, what is the future bringing in terms of jobs? They have to plan for 4 or 5 years out from when they graduate. What would you say? So that kind of what's going on now, and then what do you see for the future?
Well, there's a lot going on right now. I think what I've learned very quickly from the agricultural, working in the agricultural sector, is that business is business, right? And there's a lot of things that, there's a lot of educational areas you can be involved in, and those can very easily translate into the agricultural space. It's not something where you have to pigeonhole yourself into going into college to say, yes, I need to be, I want to be in agriculture, therefore I must take ag-based classes. Now, it does help, and there are more technically rigorous sectors of the industry that really helps with a technical educational background. For example, agronomy and plant science, really focusing on those from an undergraduate perspective will really help give you a very good lead-in into that sector of the business. But if you're really concentrating on, you know, it's really difficult to say that there isn't any one, or there isn't any sector of education that doesn't translate, because agriculture is such a broad based sector, from legal to economics to science to you name it. You can find a application in the agricultural space. And so entry-level jobs, you can be an assistant agronomist, you can work on coordinating logistics, being actively involved in the food supply chain. There's quality assurance jobs out there, there's food safety jobs out there. There are it's endless. And where I see the industry really transitioning is, by and large, I think California is really behind the times from a technology perspective, which is really interesting to hear, and really interesting to realize, because if you look at what the Midwest has been doing from an agricultural perspective, you know, they're 15, 20 years ahead of us from a data technology perspective, and from a really a smart field perspective. And so I really believe that as technology becomes cheaper and data storage becomes cheaper, a real heavy reliance on data processing and data management will really take foot in California agriculture.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I went to college, my master's degree in Ohio State. And I remember that when I graduated, they were, you know, really just kind of starting with precision agriculture. But it seems to me that it's also a lot simpler for when you really just got one crop or two crops, when you're corn and soybeans, right? So I think that's probably one of the reasons why California, to a potentially at least, has lagged behind, because most farmers have so many different kinds of crops that they're managing. And so that, you know, a little bit different to integrate all those different platforms, which now is much more possible than it was originally. It's one thing to have, you know, GPS and smart machinery on a corn harvester, right, or corn combine. Very different when you're talking about so many different kinds of harvesters, which is now, I think the other side of that is technology is caught up to a certain extent to where we are today in California. So, and I agree with you. I think there's all kinds of exciting opportunities on the technology side. And I say this all the time with students who think that there isn't some place for them in technology in agriculture, because there's a huge place for them. And I like what you said too about there's always this opportunity, you know, to kind of wherever you study in college, there's going to be an application in agriculture for sure. You know, and plenty of people do not have agricultural degrees, right? plenty of people who are working in agriculture today and have had very successful careers. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So what I also wanted to talk to you about was there's a lot of talk right now in news about the supply chain with the quarantine and with COVID-19, and specifically about this term food service, right? So there's all of these companies have lost a lot of their food service business. Can you describe in a easy way what food service is? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that there's a lot of different parts, like where you sell to a lot of different parts of the supply chain. So it'd be great to kind of understand, take your citrus business or take your grape business or whatever, and lead us through all of the different places that those grapes or those oranges or whatever it is, where do they go? And what's the difference between selling to a grocery store versus selling to food service? Because I think that is really a fundamental thing that people are learning right now. And I want to, it seems like with your company, I'm sure you sell into all of those different chains. And what does that look like?
Yeah, we have been selling into all those chains up until very, very recently. So the food service industry is one of the industries that is most hard hit by the advent of COVID-19. So when I think of food service, I think of your hotels, your restaurants, your cruise liners, all of those type of industries where they're taking in food on a relatively bulk scale, and they're processing it internally by being able to, whenever you get a slice of orange on your plate or a sprig of parsley on your plate at a restaurant, that's all contained within the food service industry. And as pandemic has spread throughout society and all these restrictions on travel and hospitality have been curtailed, that food service industry has been very hard hit because there's just not the demand. And we do have all of our commodities are very perishable. So we don't have the opportunity of holding on to them for a very long time. So one of the things in agriculture is very heavily oriented and controlled by supply and demand. So we've seen a very precipitous drop in the food service side of things. But 2 weeks ago, we had a huge uptick in our retail business. So there was a big draw on the retail supply chain. So as people are going into the supermarkets and buying in bulk and trying to prepare for the pandemic and shelter-in-place protocols, that put a significant amount of pressure on the supply chain. And so the entire industry had to really double down on production to try to meet and replenish what had been taken or what had been demanded of on the retail side of things.
Yeah, and there's so many articles right now, whether it's New York Times, with farmers plowing over beans in Florida or whatever it is, right? So it's like, it's just, I think, very confusing to people because they see the shortages or potential shortages at the grocery store, and then they see, dumping of milk trucks or plowing over fields or whatever, and there's just not, what is the percentage of your business that goes to food service? Like, just, it doesn't have to be to the decimal point, but just in general, what kind of percentages are we really talking about here?
It depends. So it's very, before all of this pandemic occurred, it was still very seasonal and there were very definitive points within the season. We would anticipate a high demand in terms of export volume. And so we would be packing and processing a lot of fruit for export to meet, the Chinese New Year and some of the other cultural events that are occurring over in Asia, or And then once those die down, which they usually die down in February, then we start going into the retail market, food service. But generally speaking, if just horseshoes and hand grenades, probably about 15 to 20% of our entire food supply on the citrus side goes into food service. Probably much less on the table grape side of things, but probably 15 to 20%.
Right. And then other farmers, it could be, 50% or whatever, right, is going to food service. So it depends, like you said, depends on the crop, depends on the particular farm or company in terms of how much of their product is going into food service. So I think a lot of what this is showing is that we're not particularly able to be super flexible. It's very difficult to switch over quickly into a different supply chain because the packaging is different, everything is different. Those contracts are different. So you can't just click a button or snap your fingers and suddenly start selling into a different supply chain that you hadn't been before. It doesn't work like that. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens as a result of this time to a lot of farms that may be really so severely impacted that they can't survive it, right? And then maybe there's even some more concentration of companies buying up others. What do you think is going to happen? What kinds of things do you think are going to happen out of this?
Well, I think unfortunately that trend's already been underway in terms of the consolidation of the agricultural space in California. So as questions regarding water security, labor security, increased cost of inputs, as all of those things continue to increase, it puts a significant amount of downward pressure on agricultural landholders, right? And so especially with permanent crops. And so with row crops, you have the flexibility of being a little bit more agile and saying, okay, well, this year I want to do soybeans, and then next year, commodity pricings are different. So you have the ability to adjust. Whereas as with California, there's been this very significant transition from row crops into permanent crops, and with that transition comes significantly less flexibility. And so as some of those crops come to the tail end of their lifespan, their productive lifespan, more and more growers are presented with the difficult questions of, well, do I want to reinvest into my farm, or do I want to kind of take the money and run sort of mentality? And so those are the very difficult questions that growers and farmers have right now. And I think unfortunately this pandemic is just another one of those pressures. But I will say that farmers are some of the most resilient people. And at times very stubborn people, but they're the most resilient people that you can ever come across. So where there's will, there's a way in agriculture, and agriculture is far too important to society. And that's another very important thing that I've learned, is how critical agriculture is to maintaining societal structure, because I think a lot of things change once people can't find food in the stores. And so, sorry, spent a lot of time answering short answers with very long.
No. That's actually a really good way to close out. And we have one of our coordinators, Letty, had a question about seasonal labor. Did you want to answer or ask that, Letty, of Vincent?
So my question is around how this COVID-19 is going to be affecting some of that seasonal labor. I know me and where I am at in Salinas, usually we see the neighborhood kind of expanding. We get a huge amount of cars in the neighborhood when we have the labor come into town. And we're just not seeing that this time. So I don't know if it's affecting you in any way, and if you can share, that'd be great.
I cannot speak highly enough of the people that are coming to work day in and day out through through this difficult and uncertain time. We've been very fortunate to have really no measurable decrease in the amount of labor supply. And so we feel like we have an obligation to those people to try to keep the doors open for as long as we possibly can. Because a lot of other individuals don't, unfortunately, are in sectors that don't have that ability. So we're trying to we're trying very hard to maintain a very fine balance between protecting the well-being of our employees, because that's our first priority, but also keeping the doors open and allowing to continue to supply retailers and consumers with the fresh produce that they need to keep their families going.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very true. I just saw, I think it was this morning, Smithfield, one of the big pork companies out of the Midwest and North Carolina, is shutting down a plant, right? Because they've had a significant number of COVID-19 cases, and they at some point realized that it was unsafe for the rest of their staff. So, and that we could continue to see that across the different, whether it's meat, whether it's crops, continuing. It'll be scary and to see. Hopefully, we don't see too much more of that. So, okay, so we have another question. Joseph, you want to ask your question?
Hey, so Vincent, now that you don't have a sort of agricultural background, do you find yourself cooking more now that you're sort of like closer and more aware of where all of your food comes from?
Well, I have an Italian background, so I was raised very early on to cook as much food as I possibly could. So not much has changed from that regard, but yeah, I definitely have a very new, very important appreciation for what goes into producing an agricultural commodity. Without any background in agriculture, going into the agricultural space, understanding how much effort and energy goes into producing a pistachio in a bag of pistachios, or producing that almond in a bag of almonds, or that beautiful bag of table grapes that you see when you walk into the produce aisle. How much energy and effort goes into that. Very few people outside of the ag industry have an appreciation for that, and I think that's one of the opportunities that the ag space has, is to continue to promote how much effort and energy and nuance goes into producing those commodities.
Very cool. Very cool.
Great question. Well, I think that's a good way to end today. Again, appreciation for food and where our food comes from, and agriculture and our farm workers, and certainly our many companies out there that are making sure that we still have lots of food at the grocery stores, and all the grocery store folks too, because they are on the front lines as well. So thank you so much, Vincent. We really appreciate your time this morning. Great to know more about AC operations, and I know Romi is going to be in touch with you, because we have talked about internships with your company down in the Bakersfield area and potentially in some of your other regions, because we run programs up and down the state. So I look forward to continuing to work with you and finding opportunities for our students, whether they are just graduating from high school or in college, and looking for opportunities, whether it's during the summers or after they graduate. So thank you so much again for your time, and we'll be talking again soon.
Great. Thank you all.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye.